Yeah, I think one of the big things that changes from just going from like a senior product manager to like a VP of product manager to a chief product officer is being able to connect the business back to your software. So while we tell everybody in the, in the senior product manager position, like you have to understand the business and put it into the context for other people, what great product leaders do is actually dig into the financials and start to prove out like how their products get the business moving, right? Like how their products are critical for the business. And I think that's key. So that's what I really see as a big differentiating factor for great product leaders and good product leaders is that. So connecting the financials and how your business runs back into what you're doing with product and product development and your strategy. I also see great product leaders as really pulling themselves out of the weeds. So I tweeted like the other day, like chief product officers shouldn't be writing user stories, right? And I firmly like believe that. A lot of people were like, oh, then a chief product officer doesn't have to write a user story. It's like, no, like they should know how to, right? But they did that already, they passed. Like if you're writing user stories for a feature, you can't do your job as a VP of product or a chief product officer. Like you have to delegate to other people. So you should be really working on strategy. I like to say that product leaders should be focusing like 1 year out, 2 years out, 3 years out, right? Like further than what is happening today, what is happening this sprint, and what is happening this quarter. You want to monitor the progress for the quarter, and you want to like review roadmaps with your teams for what that quarter is. But like you shouldn't be dictating like what features are going to get built in that quarter, right? You should be aligning the strategy to the long term and then working with your team to figure out what can they do in this quarter, what is their direction, and giving them feedback and coaching them towards that. So, coming out of the weeds. And I'd say too, like a difference between a good and great product leader that I've seen too is that when we know that product management is like is a skill and it's a job where it really cuts across everything in an organization. Like great product leaders are peers to every other function in the organization. Like instead of blaming sales for overselling stuff, which sales shouldn't do, they go over to sales and they say, okay, let's make some structure. Let's make some, operations around how we work together. Like this is how we work. We're going to call these things, we'll put language around it. We'll do alpha, betas, and generally available releases. Every quarter, I'll get together with you. We'll align roadmaps. I'll tell you what you can sell. I'll tell you what we can't sell. I'll come to meetings with you. I'll sit with you on sales calls, right? Like they really see those people as peers, not adversaries, and they know how to work with them in the organization to make it better. So it's not just, oh, I'm in charge of product. It's more of like, how do I make sure that, since a lot of people rely on us to get things, to get things done, how do I make sure that my peers have everything they need to be successful as well? I actually think it's really important. Like I've worked with a lot of people who were product leaders, but they never were product managers before. And it's not that they can't learn some of the skills required, but I do think that you find the more successful product leaders have been product managers before, right? They've actually operated on the team level. So they understand what it takes to get things done, right? They understand how to estimate features. They understand how to work with developers. They understand like why things take as long as they do. There's so much more empathy, I think, in product leaders who have done the job before as a product manager to get up there. I know in a lot of places that are going through, I would say like agile or digital transformations, which are a lot of large companies, they'll make the product leader somebody who comes from the industry, right? And they have a lot of domain knowledge in the industry, but they don't have a lot of experience in product management. And I think that's really, really hard. And I find that those companies struggle a lot because those people don't quite understand how to scale software. And they may look at things too in the way that the company has already done stuff. And usually when you go through a digital transformation or you go through an agile transformation, whatever you're doing to, bring software more into how you run your business, you're now looking at your business in a completely different way. And you should be looking at it as like, hey, we've always done it this way, but what can we do to be more innovative? What can we do to be more competitive? And I think if you take people who have never done product management before, but maybe have been at that place for 30 to 40 years, and you tell them to go, hey, look at things in a different way, sometimes it's really hard for them. So in some companies that we've worked with, we have brought in like chief product officers into those types of companies that have gone through that transformation. They come from the outside. They are purely chief product officers. They may not be a domain expert, but they've worked on a type of product like the one that they're trying to build. And they just provide like fresh thinking, right? And it shakes it up. And I think that's really important for companies who have maybe been doing the same thing over and over for like a very long time. Yeah, so my big thing is really, so I noticed this thing that happens a lot with people who are squad product managers or lower levels. They always complain about how management doesn't want to listen to them, or they can't get their stakeholders on board, and they're having a really hard time telling their story is what it really comes down to. So what we do in this workshop and what we do with a lot of squad leaders is we tell them how to position their stories in a way that people start to really resonate with it and they can get leadership buy-in. So when you think about like leaders, they don't care about your sprint or your story points or, you know, your like minute trade-offs about buttons or anything like that. And sometimes they ask about it because they don't know what else to ask for, right? Like they just don't know products. So it's really hard for them to do that. But if you want to like convince people or make, you know, make a play for what you want there, you have to start to figure out like what matters to them. And that's how you get buy-in, right? Like that's how I do it too as a consultant. Like everybody asks me like, how do I sway my leadership team? They don't understand like what product is and they just don't get it. So what you have to do is start thinking about what do they get and what matters to them. And a lot of leaders care about hitting certain types of goals. Usually they're financial goals. And to be a great product leader and start to go from like a squad product manager to a real product leader, you start to tell your story in a way that shows people how it reaches their goals. So it's not, hey, we're just going to build these products. Here's our project plan. Here's our story points. This is what we're doing every sprint. It's, we believe that by building this product, right, it will solve these problems for customers, which will result in moving these metrics for our business. So here's all the financial metrics we're moving. Here's what we think the outcomes will be. This is how I think it will help sales. This is how I think it will help our position in the market. Here's how we're positioned about competitors, right? It's not just about the motions that we go to on a day-to-day basis. You have to pull yourself out of that and start to think about how does this really connect to our position as a business.
This is great. I was laughing because I made the transition a year ago, and a lot of things became very clearer to me after assuming as a product leader. And I also believe that if I ever want to come back to get back as a squad product managers, I think I would be a way better product manager now.
Exactly, that too. I think when people get thrown into the product leader position, and a lot of us just got thrown into it, right? It was like, ta-da, you're now the product leader. Figure it out. There's nobody else here to learn from. You know, when you see it from that perspective, when you get it, you go, oh, if I had gone back and done this type of stuff, it would have been better for me. Like I just learned personally that, you know, at one of the companies that I worked with for as a squad product leader, product manager, right? I was doing tons of experimentation and I was surfacing it up to the results up to management, and it was all really, really good and clear. And they just came back and told me like a couple, my VP of product at the time, right? I still keep in touch with him. He came back and he's like, do you realize that like all that experimentation that you did like, you know, 9 years ago pivoted our entire company? And I was like, no, it would have been nice if you told me that at the time. Like maybe I would have stayed, but like, no, I had no idea, right? Like I didn't understand the impacts that my work had on the rest of the business. And it was because I wasn't quite thinking about it at the time, right? So part of it was like, they didn't communicate to us, you know, why we were making changes or how it was. But a big part of it was my fault, right? Like it was me not asking, what are you going to do with this information, right? Like what kind of decisions are getting made out of this? How does this help you? And then trying to position my work in a way that helps leaders. So I got lucky because all my work did help the leaders and it did help get them there. But I could have taken more initiative, and looking back on it, you know, it would completely change the way I did it. But I should have taken more initiative to ask them like, you know, are these numbers helping you? Like, what are you doing with it? How does it change our strategy? How does it affect things? And have those conversations. If you usually ask, people are really like, like they want to share, like your leaders want to tell you why you're doing things. Ooh, yeah. So like product is the one thing that really like pulls everything together. Like I think product leaders are looking at how do you disseminate a ton of information, and turn that into a strategy that helps you scale things through repeatable, sellable, packageable products, right? Like you scale and you grow your business through software, right? Rather than services or consulting, like we would customize everything for everybody. You don't want to do that, right? As a software person, you got to figure out, how do I resell this? How do I solve the needs of many, not just one? And when you look at the other positions in the company, one of the biggest differences is that those people are not usually taking in as much information as a product manager from all different types of places. Like as a product manager and product leader, you're looking at like, what are my sales? What are my costs? What are my margins? What are my teams doing for features, right? What are my competitors doing? How am I positioned in the market? What are my like growth goals? What are my KPIs? What is my NPS? What is my customer satisfaction rate? Like there's so much information that you look at, and sometimes it can be like paralyzing and you have to figure out how to get over that. But if you look at other domains and other places too, they're not, a lot of the stuff too is a little bit more predictable, and you get answers a little bit faster than in product development. Like if I build a feature today and release it in 3 months, but it's a decision like I make today about the feature that's going to get out there in 3 months, I'm not really sure if that was successful for another 3 months, right? Or until you start selling it, or sometimes it's 6 months. So you kind of have to be really, really good at placing bets, right? And you have to figure out, how do I look at all that data from all those different places and use that to become more and more predictive about placing my bets and taking the right bets, right? Making the right choices and doing the right experiments to figure out, how do I get there? Like with sales, you can change your tactics and pretty much figure out in a month, right? If my tactics change, or if my tactics are working, because you're closing those sales, right? You get immediate feedback there. So with product, like it's not quite there. And I think a lot of product leaders have to be really good at, one, getting comfortable with ambiguity. Like you cannot be 100% certain about some of these decisions, and that's okay, right? You just have to be willing to say, like, I have enough information and we're going to go this way. And two, de-risking those decisions too. So I have enough information, we're going this way, but we're going to run these experiments to make sure that we're going in the right direction. And I'm going to look at this feedback often and start to change course if I find out it's the wrong decision. Yeah, I'd say like looking at a lot of different data and then feeling comfortable doing things small, right? Like I say the best way to get started is by making small bets, right? So the more small bets you place, the more bigger bets you're willing to take after a while when you get that feedback, right? I think the biggest thing that holds a lot of people back is that they're afraid to even do something and to just put it out. So when we teach even just like squad level product managers, right? They may spend like months researching stuff, and you're like, don't research, like research a little bit, right? Like time box yourself, give yourself 2 weeks to talk to as many customers as you possibly can, get all the information, and then try something small, right? And see if it works. And then when you put things out there into the world, you start to get feedback back. And I'm not saying, and I guess this is where like a lot of large companies get scared as well. And they go, oh, like we just can't be putting out everything. Like, you know, we'll break things. Like we're a serious company. And I get it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not saying put buttons to nowhere and like break stuff. What I'm saying is like, take one person out of your like 50,000 clients, right? Like take one person from one company or two people and put a prototype in front of them, right? Or run a small experiment with them, or take their data and put it into an Excel sheet and come back to them and say, was this the analysis or calculation that you're looking for, right? Like there's really small ways to test like that and get immediate feedback. And that helps you feel more sure about where you're going. And I think we all have to get more comfortable with that. And that's where I think you get more comfortable taking bets, by placing small ones and then working your way up to the larger ones. I do, but it depends what type of company you're in. But if you are in a company that your business is software, which I think a lot of companies are going towards, if your business is software, if you are, if you're scaling through software, if that's how you make your money and that's the thing that you sell, right? And I would say maybe you don't have a huge services arms, or maybe you're not a bank with like a million different branches, right? I think that's a different animal. I think product people make great CEOs in those cases, where, you know, they may make great CEOs if they have backgrounds in other things as well for the other types of companies like banks or something like that. But I think if a company's primary means of delivering value to their customers is through software, then I think product managers make great CEOs. And that's probably why they call people mini CEOs, but that makes sense if your business is software, right? There's a lot of complicated businesses out there. There's a lot of people who are really good at managing those businesses. But I do think that companies that really want to make a stance and want to grow through software, you know, they really should have people at the helm, and they should be looking at this role. If they don't have product people as a CEO, they should have a chief product officer who's the right-hand person of the CEO, who's figuring out what can we do through software? How do we grow? How do we deliver more value? So a good strategy, I like Stephen Bungay's definition of strategy. And strategy is what he says, I probably won't get this word for word, but I'll get the gist of it. It's a deployable decision-making framework. So I love that, right? It's deployable decision-making framework. So what a good strategy does is it says, where are we going in the future, right? What do we want to be when we grow up? You know, and it looks very long-term. And then what it does is it puts just enough structure in place so that people can decide what course should I take, right? And that's where we also get into roadmaps with products, right? Roadmaps are a manifestation and a communication of what the strategy is, right? And what the choices are that we took on the way to strategy. So what strategy does is it looks at like, where am I now and where do I want to go? And then it lets you choose what's the best path to get there. And it puts like the major milestones along the way. And as you get to the milestone, you may reconfigure your strategy, look at where am I now, where do I still have to go, and you reset from there. But what it does is it allows people in the organization to make the decisions about which is the right path, right? It's not saying you must go this way, you must take this road, you know, for 5 miles, and then you stop and you make a right-hand turn. No, it says like, I need you to get from, you know, Austin, Texas to San Francisco, California. Figure out what's the best path to get there. And then they put like a constraints around it as like, you know, maybe you only have this much gas. So, you know, think about that way, or you can only spend this much money, right? But it's up to the team and it's up to that person to figure out what's the best path to get there, right, within those constraints. And I think that's what strategy is all about, like very intentionally saying we are here and this is where we want to get to, and then helping to align people to make the right decisions to get there.
And somehow you have to also say what you don't want to do and what paths you don't want to take, right?
Yeah.
Right. And
yep. So you can say like, flying is not an option, right? Because you don't have
sure.
that much money, right? Like you have to take a train, or you have to drive, or you have to take a bus, right? Like you got different options that way, but like flying's not an option, right? And that's not what we want to do. And I think saying what you don't want to do is just as important as saying what you do want to do, because it helps you, you know, weed out different options and it helps you narrow your field. I think if you are curious about like, what does the life of a product leader look like? You know, what do chief product officers do? How do they look at other organizations? It's a workshop for you. We're going to teach you practical skills about how to communicate with leadership. And I think it will make people not just, you know, set off on the right path for product leadership, but also it will make you a better squad leader. So I'm hoping everybody comes out and enjoys it.